Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we are going to unpack one of the most fascinating paradoxes in modern leadership and team building. It's this massive illusion that throwing crazy amounts of money at a problem automatically equals massive results. Honestly, it's a trap leaders fall into literally every single day. We kind of just assume that if we buy the absolute best talent available, success is basically guaranteed, right? Well, as we're about to see, that assumption can actually rot your organization from the inside out. 1 billion euros. Just let that sink in for a second. That is the staggering amount of money the football club Paris Saint-Germain, or PSG, spent over a 14-year period. And they didn't just spend it on anybody. They used this unbelievable war chest to acquire 3 of the greatest footballers alive: Lionel Messi, Neymar, and Kylian Mbappé. I mean, they assembled a literal dream team, an absolute powerhouse of individual brilliance like we'd never seen before on one roster. You'd think a billion-dollar investment in generational talent would just guarantee total dominance. Well, guess what the return on that massive investment was? 0. Yep, after 167 Champions League matches over those 14 years, they won 0 Champions League trophies. The ultimate prize in European football completely eluded them. And that right there instantly sets up a massive mystery. How on earth does a team with the 3 best players on the planet, backed by basically limitless resources, fail so spectacularly on the biggest stage? But the answer actually isn't on the football pitch at all. This is a totally universal story about ego. It's a lesson about what happens when an entire organization bows down to individual superstars, and more importantly, the radical transformation that happens when a leader finally steps in and says, enough. And trust me, this applies just as much to your corporate boardroom as it does to a stadium. So let's get into part 1, the dependency disease. To really grasp this disease, I want you to think about the most dysfunctional teams you've ever worked on or observed. There is almost always a super familiar pattern, isn't there? There's that one superstar who gets all the credit, the one person the entire strategy revolves around. Maybe it's a sales director who closes every massive deal but flat out refuses to share a playbook, making everyone else obsolete. Or maybe it's a founder who hoards control and makes every single decision in a vacuum. Or hey, maybe it's that brilliant senior developer whose code works beautifully, but nobody else in the entire company can actually read or understand it. That dynamic right there, that is not a talent problem. You obviously have the talent. What that is a dependency problem. Relying entirely on one person is a massive, fatal flaw. For PSG, their whole strategy was essentially just to give Mbappé the ball and pray. Literally every season, that was the big plan. And every single season in Europe, they would inevitably collapse under the pressure. Why? Because you absolutely cannot build a resilient organization on the shoulders of one individual's mood or form. And that brings us to a really dangerous truth. Talent without structure is just expensive chaos. Without a real, solid framework, a collapse isn't just possible, it's inevitable. The talent ends up running the system, rather than the system utilizing the talent. All right, part 2, hiring a culture destroyer. So how do you actually fix expensive chaos? Well, PSG made a wildly unconventional choice. They didn't go out and hire the safe name with the pristine resume. Instead, they hired Luis Enrique, a manager who had literally just been knocked out of the World Cup by Morocco. He'd been publicly humiliated, pretty much written off by the media. In corporate terms, they hired the candidate who failed very publicly at their last job. But why? Because they didn't want a caretaker to massage massive egos anymore. They specifically wanted a culture destroyer. It's actually a direct parallel to Microsoft. Back when Satya Nadella took over in 2014, the company was reeling from the Nokia and Surface failures. The board didn't want some safe insider to maintain the status quo. They wanted someone who could kill that ego-driven culture overnight and usher in a brand new growth mindset era. And Enrique brought that exact same disruptive energy straight to PSG. When their biggest superstar, Kylian Mbappé, pushed back against the new direction, did Enrique beg him to stay? Nope. He just defiantly stated, "Next year will be better without doubt." That is such a profound moment. That's exactly what it looks like when a leader enforces a culture instead of just coping with egos. He was sending a clear signal. The system is now way more important than any single player. Which leads us to part 3, building the system. Now, actually dismantling that ego required a monumental shift in day-to-day strategy. Enrique made a completely shocking decision. He chose to play without a traditional striker. Instead, he looked at Ousmane Dembélé. Now, Dembélé had been widely labeled as a €105 million flop from his time at Barcelona. People thought he was too inconsistent, too injury-prone. He was, for all intents and purposes, a written-off talent. But Enrique completely repositioned him. He stopped using him as a finisher and turned him into a disruptor. And by simply placing him in the right role within a brand new system, Dembélé went from being a so-called flop to literally winning the Ballon d'Or. This perfectly proves a massive leadership principle. Change the context, not the people. Think about it. How many employees have you seen written off just because they were forced into the wrong role? This connects perfectly to Reed Hastings over at Netflix. When the whole industry shifted from mailing DVDs to digital streaming, Hastings didn't just fire all his engineers, he repositioned them. He changed the context so their existing talents could thrive in the new system. Enrique did the exact same thing with Dembélé.
But look, a new system only works if you have total buy-in. So Enrique instituted a strict, absolutely unyielding rule to make PSG's new framework function. He ensured there were zero passengers. It's that famous Amazon principle: disagree and commit, meaning you are fully expected to challenge the decision while you're in the meeting room, but the second that decision is made, ego is left at the door and everyone executes perfectly. Under Enrique, there was no more walking around the pitch. If you didn't commit to the system, you didn't play. Period.
So, part 4, the ultimate payoff. What were the tangible results of violently killing that ego culture? Absolute dominance. In the 2025 Champions League final against Inter Milan, PSG won 5-0. That wasn't just a win, guys. It was the largest winning margin in the entire history of the Champions League final. The team that spent 14 years failing with the 3 greatest players in the world finally reached the mountaintop, and they completely destroyed the competition to get there. And get this, look at exactly how they did it. There was no Messi, no Neymar, and no Mbappé on the pitch. Instead, a 19-year-old named Désiré Doué completely dominated the final. He scored twice and provided an assist. Now, did he do this because he's some once-in-a-generation magical genius who carried the whole team on his back? No. He dominated because the system put him in the exact right position to succeed. And it wasn't a fluke either. PSG achieved back-to-back finals, which is something no French club had ever done before. When you compare the two eras side by side, the difference is just night and day. Expensive chaos gave them $1 billion bill and 0 trophies. System trust gave them back-to-back finals and historic victories. By replacing that toxic ego dependency with a really deep trust in the system, literally everything changes. The goals get shared, the credit gets shared, and ultimately, the trophies get shared.
Finally, part 5, the leadership lesson.
Because remember, this explainer was never really just about a football club. The core thesis here is incredibly simple. Talent should serve the system should never revolve around talent. The most dangerous thing in your organization is not a lack of brilliant people. It's having brilliant people who dictate the system. When a superstar's ego threatens the team, you have to choose the culture. Every single time. Because the right system built with people who actually trust it is always going to outlast the most expensive, talented individual in the world. I want to leave you with a pretty stark question today to really challenge your current setup. If your absolute best person resigned tomorrow, I'm talking your top salesperson, your lead developer, your star player, would your organization collapse or would it adapt? PSG used to be a team that would completely collapse, but now their biggest star is playing for a rival and they're the ones lifting the biggest trophy in the world. Your team should never be one resignation away from a crisis. So build a resilient system first. And hey, if this analysis made you think differently about how your own team is structured, share this explainer with a leader in your life who really needs to hear it. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll catch you in the next one.